Good morning. This is our last day.
Hello.
Our panel today is Fictionalizing Time. The panel investigates how time is not it's not limited to historical fiction. The conversation of this panel will speak more to the concept of time as a character in the novel. So the three writers across generations will talk about their works in the context of imagined stories grounded in periods of time. Let me introduce our first speaker. Robin Sebolino is a novelist and publisher. He is the author of the historical novels Vassals of the Valley and Bells and Incense, works that introduce readers to likable characters and uplifting historical adventures. As co founder of Plaza Books, he is dedicated to publishing titles that celebrate the rich multicultural heritage of the Philippines and its global connections. He and his organization commit to the advancement of books that emphasize hope and happiness. Through this, he invites cross cultural dialogue that enhances the meaning of culture and tradition. Through his writing and publishing, he aspires to foster understanding, curiosity, and appreciation for heritage that is shaped by local and international influences. For those who may be needing simultaneous translation, you may approach this side to get your headphones. And now I give the floor to Robin. Robin?
Okay, hello everyone. I think I can. Is it functioning? Sorry, I'm just trying to check. So I'll just signal to you if to move the slides. Okay, so I'm Robin, and I'll basically say my thoughts about what do I mean? What do we mean by fictionalizing time? So, yeah, could we move to the first slide? Okay, so that's me. All right, so these are images of yeah. Some of them are Filipino, some of them aren't. I basically did a hodgepodge of images. So let's move again. Okay, so I just wanted to emphasize. So, what do you mean by fictionalizing? So, the dictionary definition is to tell a story. But here, I'd like to add that when we fictionalize something, I emphasize the idea of beauty. When we fictionalize a story or time, what I mean is we look for the beautiful things in it, and then we put it in story form. So, basically, making a beautiful story. And what do I mean by beautiful? Of course, it's self-explanatory, but I want to emphasize the uplifting part of it. Okay. Some people would just say it's fun, but really, I want to go for the term uplifting. When we experience it, when we fictionalize something, we need to be entertained at the very least. Okay. So yeah, next slide, please. Okay, and by time, of course, it's self-explanatory. But here, I'd want to emphasize the how we at least try to make sense of it, which is the past, present, and future. So I think I need the highlight. Since I'm a historical fictionist, I'm going to focus on history. Okay, so to connect that to what I've said previously, I want to tell stories about history that is uplifting, that is beautiful. Now, I'm sure all of you have had not very good experience with encountering history. I think that class is often accused of being one of your dullest classes. Um, but I think it has a great potential, actually, history, to give us something entertaining, uplifting. And that's what I do, okay? When I fictionalize time, when I fictionalize history, I look for the beautiful things in it, and then I tell stories about them. Okay, so let's just emphasize that. So, historical fiction, that's it for me. So to move on, next slide. All right, so make that history uplifting, and then let's keep clicking. Okay, so why do we do it? So we do it, at least I do it. It's because we kind of want to tap into this. So I'll just leave you to read it for a bit, a couple of seconds. Okay, so I like to really take advantage of this inherent desire in people to connect. So normally when we want to connect with people, we think of other places because that's very doable. Travel from the Philippines to Germany, from Germany to the Philippines, and then we connect. But another probably more difficult, if not impossible, connection we can make is how do we connect people from the past? The past is, of course, a foreign country as well. In the same way that the future is a foreign country that we keep pursuing, and a lot of that we're not going to reach. And that's what I basically try to take advantage of, what I want to capitalize on, this desire, essentially, to connect. And that in itself will be the source of upliftment because it is fun meeting new people, not only of this generation, but generations of the past can lead us to it. So that's what I essentially do. Now, how do I do that? There are many ways, and I'd like to hear your thoughts, actually. If you have any questions, for now, as I end, I'd just like to emphasize that when I do that, when I write my characters in history, I make sure that you see real people who can laugh, who can feel sad, who get inspired, um, but are nevertheless conditioned by their time, by their reality, which me, as a 21st century person, can only imagine. So if you wonder what milieu I write, I mainly write of about the 16th century Philippines and the 17th century Hispanic Philippines. That's my main thing for now, but eventually it could be something else. All right, so I hope I've shared enough.
Thank you very much, Robin. Let's give him a big round of applause. I will now introduce our next speaker. Ian Rosales Casocot is a fictionist and teaches film, literature, and creative writing at Silliman University in Dumaguete City in the Philippines. He has won several Palanca Awards for his fiction, plays, and children's poetry. He was writer in residence for the International Writers Program of the University of Iowa in the United States in 2010. He has produced the film documentary City of Literature, directed by the Chinese filmmaker Xiao Louis Liu. He is profiled in the literature volume of the Cultural Center of the Philippines Encyclopedia of Philippine Arts. Ian, you have the floor.
Hi. Can you hear me? Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Ian. I'm actually glad that Robin started off this particular panel because I like the fact that he defined what we mean by the topic fictionalizing time. Because I actually have a bit of a different take. I want to talk about a sense of place and a sense of time. So I'm putting in place in the topic that we are going to discuss this particular morning. Next slide, please. Okay. This is my hometown of Dumaguete City in Negros Oriental, right in the middle of the Philippines, in a region we call the Visayas. Okay, I start with this particular slide because for the longest part of my literary career, my hometown has essentially been my muse. I've been writing about this particular place forever. Okay, I began my literary career by writing mostly autobiographical stories, often focusing on my hometown, my family, and also a little bit, a little bit down, on my sexuality, okay? Because, I obey the adage, write what you know. That's what they tell us in creative writing school. And this was also a part of my project to contribute stories about my city to the greater imagination of the Philippines because I didn't want Philippine literature to just be about Manila. Philippine literature is about Dumaguete, of Bacolod, Cebu City, Mindanao, and so on and so forth. So me writing about my hometown is my contribution to people to create a geography of Philippine literature. Next slide. In 2003, a long time ago, I was actually in a writer's workshop in Iligan City in Mindanao where I met this writer, Rosario Cruz Rosero, who actually comes from the other capital in my island of Negros, Bacolod City. Uh, and she actually eventually would produce one of my favorite books, which is Feast and Famine, uh, a fabulous collection of short stories about my island. Okay, and they were mostly historical in nature. And in a lecture that she gave during that particular workshop in Iligan, she talked about going to our indigenous roots in storytelling to properly frame and understand the stories that we write about. It is that particular speech actually is contained in an essay she eventually titled The Music of Pestle on Mortar. And that talk actually galvanized one thing for me. To write about the places where we come from, which I was already doing, but with the added dimension of time. Write about the forgotten history of your home. That's what Rosario Cruz Rosero told me. Because if you don't, this history will remain forgotten. Next slide, please. Rosario Cruz Rosero actually used one particular anecdote about the history of my island, about the 1856 genocide of the Carolan. an ancient tribe in my island of Negros, by Spanish colonizers in the name of pacifying the island for colonial control. She said that this part of my local history is largely forgotten today. In fact, that was the first time I've heard about it in 2003. And if no one writes about it, the forgetfulness will continue. Next slide, please. That lecture that Rosario Cruz Rosero gave actually touched me very deeply and actually seriously affected what I have written about since then. It made me realize that to write about place, about where we are from, is important, but that an important part of that is also writing about time, meaning historical time, meaning digging into our easily forgotten history and make stories out of it because no one else will. Forgetfulness is the enemy. Next slide, please. One of the stories that actually came out, after I was influenced by Rosario Cruz Rosero, is a story that I titled "A Strange Map of Time," which comes from my first book, Heartbreak and Magic. And I learned a lot from Lucero that I actually used the element of time travel about a pre-colonial boy actually who got transported to the far-off future of Negros, and then he goes back in time and then seeing the history happening in my city, so from the future to the past, and then learning his name, and then I don't want to summarize anymore because you might you might want to get a copy of this particular book. But I really use the element of time in talking about the place where I come from. Okay, so a strange map of time from Heartbreak and Magic. Next slide, please. Another one was a more serious piece of historical fiction that I titled The Secret Love and Personal History of Tigulang, Liberator of Negros, where I essentially fictionalized the life of the one person in my island who tried to wrest us away from Spanish control in the time of the Katipunan. I was so fascinated by his life that I tried to fictionalize it to kind of bring his story alive to contemporary audiences because even though he was a hero of the revolution, even in my city, even my island, he is actually not very, very well known. A very important man in our history, largely forgotten. So I resolved to write a story about him so that people will at least remember him, at least through my stories. So this is about Tigulang from my book, Beautiful Accidents. Next slide, please. And then in my novel, Sugarland, I've tried to tell the story of a real-life serial killer from my own hometown of Dumaguete in the 1960s and the 1970s. I thought that this was a good chance to capture a place in a very particular time. The subject of my novel was a very, very rich, very, very handsome haciendero or landowner, okay, who would woo local women. And when they got pregnant or when they got clingy, he would eventually murder them and bury them in his farm in the nearby town of Tanhay, where he planted sugarcane. Okay? I was fascinated by this particular history. A serial killer in my hometown, and he happened to be a landowner, and nobody cared because he was rich. Okay, that fascinated me so much. This particular story actually comes before my own time, but I know that this story had legs, and everybody in my hometown were constantly talking about it in parties and other gatherings. The gossip piling on with more and more information about this particular man and what he did in our hometown. Next slide, please. What I found, however, is that the story kept on changing and evolving over time, like an urban legend. Time has an effect on the veracity of stories, I have noticed. Time makes legends grow and grow, and then all of a sudden, the legends fade and become anecdote. This is what I have tried capturing in my novel, Sugarland. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. And now we go to our final speaker, Jose Dalisay Jr., or popularly known as Butch Dalisay, is the multi-awarded author of 40 books of stories, plays, and essays. He taught English and creative writing as a full professor at the University of the Philippines and served as chairman of the English department and director of the UP Institute of Creative Writing. He retired in 2019 and was named Professor Emeritus. In 2007, his second novel, Soledad's Sister, was shortlisted for the inaugural Man Asian Literary Prize. His novels have been translated into and published in Italian, Spanish, French, German, and US editions. He is currently at work on his third novel and several biographies. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you so much, and very good morning to everyone. Magandang umaga. I'm sorry for being a little late, which kind of brings us into the when you ask people what Filipino time is, that usually means like 30 minutes after whatever the time we agreed upon is. But let me take a step back from what these two gentlemen have said, and indeed talk about what time means to us Filipinos, and maybe not just us, but we can think of time in terms of mythic time, where we go back to some past that we never saw, but we can reimagine in story and music. These pictures that we have here bring us back to that time. The very first image is that of a lizard devouring the sun, from which we get the phrase "pagkagat ng dilim," when the crocodile, or the reptile of night, devours the daylight. And then, of course, we have historical time. And this is interesting because, and this probably connects to our very informal sense of time. We Filipinos don't really count our time with absolute precision. In that sense, we are very un-Germanic. We say more or less, and even in terms of our history, we look back at our history in terms of great periods of it. Because of our history as a colonized nation, we tend to break historical time down into these major periods rather. Panahon ng Castilla, the Spanish times. Panahon ng Amerikano, the American times. Panahon ng Hapon, when the Japanese occupied us for a few years. Curiously, I don't think we have a term for the post-war period. But then comes martial law, which is a huge chunk of 20 years, and which we still refer to as martial law. And then there was EDSA, that street revolt that got rid of the dictatorship and replaced it with something a bit better than that, but which, curiously enough, has gone back to, in a sense, where we began 50 years ago with another Marcos in Malacanang Palace. So there's a certain, given that, and I'm sure that you also appreciate that here in Germany, many decades after Hitler, we have the resurgence of the right and the Alternative für Deutschland. Same thing is happening to us. There is a resurgence of the right, and we have many things to sort out again. But I myself have written some historical fiction, and since this is about fictionalizing time, when I come to think of it, my first novel, Killing Time in a Warm Place, which is set in the 1960s and 70s, by now has become historical fiction. I mean, that's ancient history to many Filipinos. It's a living thing to me, but not to my young students, and maybe not even to these gentlemen on stage with me, who never saw what that really was. It's just as ancient as Panahon ng Hapon is a Japanese times where to me. But one aspect of fictionalizing time is, especially in a highly politicized and maybe dangerous writing environment, such as we have in the Philippines is that we resort to historical fiction, or in my case, to historical drama, as a tactic of evasion, uh, as a means of survival. Because, like writing during and under martial law, you could not speak about the present. So therefore, necessarily, you had to you had to employ metaphor, like a long story or practically a novella that I wrote titled Voyager, which I began writing shortly after the assassination of Senator Ninoy Aquino in 1983. Like many writers, I asked myself, so what am I going to do about this as a writer? And I said, of course I will write a story, but I cannot write a story about the present. And so I wrote Voyager, which was about the assassination of a returning revolutionary, but set it 100 years in the past. Not in 1983, but in 1883, and I hope that the audience would pick that up. But the great thing about fictionalizing time is that, of course, like all fiction, it's liberating. You are not bound by historical fact, but are rather encouraged by creative imagination to not just go back in time, but to reinvent time and to make things that may never have happened look possible. And that, again, is the power of fiction and literature beyond mere reportage, beyond mere history. We are reimagining and recreating time and, in effect, rewriting history. Thank you.
The floor is open for Q&A, but if no hands are yet, oh, there are. Okay. So you can start. And then if there are no hands later, I'll ask a question. But if there are, you first. Okay, yes, please.
Hi, Butch.
We can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, so my question is, I think what happened with the Philippines a few years ago apparently is happening now in the United States. Like I moved to the United States 30 years ago, and I found out recently that they had stopped teaching martial law to school children. So this was, whoever voted for BBM this year, it was because they thought, oh yeah, they didn't learn about the horrors of martial law. And it seems that now that I live in California, Trump is trying to erase all the downsides of slavery and various other things that he doesn't want people to, he's whitewashing. So my question is, as a writer of fiction, how do you bring that alive so that people know, yes, you can write about the metaphors of like Ninoy Aquino as someone returning, like, and explain this was 100 years before, but how do you bring this time alive? Because I remember being asked by high school kids about my novel, well, was martial law really bad? And I was like, have you not read Jose Dalisay? There are all these living writers in the Philippines who speak about it. If they don't talk to you about it in school, how do you combat that? How do you combat the erasure of actual things that happened that you have to write, that you had to write in metaphor about at the time?
Well, I guess that's to me. Well, of course, part of the challenge is always revisiting and teaching history, and we often blame ourselves for the fact that we don't teach history of martial law enough. But you know what a German friend told me? We teach our history under Nazism here in Germany as well. And that is very deeply embedded in our laws. But look what happens anyway. Which makes me think that it's not enough to just keep telling people that, this happened, this happened, this happened. You have to make the past, you have to connect the past to their present. You have to give them a stake in that past, because it could happen to you again. So I don't want to just return to the past and set it up as some kind of horror story. They have to understand that you don't even, well, you do need to look back to appreciate your present, but you have to bring that story into the present, and that is really the job of fiction, more than it is of the historian or the journalist. When you tell people this happened to us, they'll nod respectfully, but yes, thank you, but you're not me. So how do you make you me? And it's our job to connect the generations. All right, more than just giving them ancient history.
I think Robin has something to, but and Ian. Okay, Robin, go ahead.
So, ma'am, just to be clear, you mentioned something about how do we write about martial law or
How do you keep
basically
it
dark
alive
times.
so that generations
Yeah.
who were not born when Butch had to write in metaphor about martial law
Okay.
still learn about it?
Okay. Okay. So I'm just gonna expand that a little bit. So martial law, when we say that, it tends to be a very negative time, dark time in the Philippines. So I'd say, in response to that, so how do I write about the dark times? So as regards these things, what I do is I stick to nonfiction. I research a lot. Because the thing is, the way I see it, when it comes to dark, sensitive, controversial things, we have to be grave. We have to be very nuanced. And that's why, for example, when we talk about World War II, when we talk about genocide, I like to stick to the facts as much as possible. I avoid using my imagination.
But
Um,
isn't your advocacy hope and happiness?
Exactly. So
So
I'll get
what?
to that.
How? Yeah. Okay.
That's
Sorry.
it. So yeah, if it's the thing is, if it's a happy story, for example, I think that's the nice thing about happy things and hopeful things. When we're happy, when we're hopeful, we can afford to be flippant. We can afford to use our imagination. We can laugh. We can play with facts. But when we're talking about very sensitive things like martial law and dark things, that's when I think we have to be very serious. And that's why, again, at least for me, my own bias is if I want to read about like the genocide, for example, I'd go to nonfiction. I'd read the biographies of victims. I'd read the, even court trials of the people who were harmed. I can do fiction, but I tend to be very cautious because now it's a very personal take of a writer. It's still okay. It's a valuable thing. So that's how I do it. I go into detail, facts when it's dark times. But if it's a happy story, if it's a happy period, then we can play, we can have fun. So that's my take on it. That's why I only write happy stories. I feel like there's more freedom.
Yeah. Well, my take is that I actually like the fact that during dark times, writing about the dark times, I actually kind of like the idea of like fictionalizing it or writing poetry about it because dramatizing the pain really gets into the heart of the matter. Okay. I do have some brushes about writing about the dark times during the dark times in the recent Duterte era. I actually founded a little literary magazine I call the Kill List Chronicles, which was eventually shut down by Facebook. I don't know why. So I got contributions from many writers writing about what was happening during Duterte, about the extrajudicial killings in poetry, in drama, in fiction, and the pieces that they gave me were very very powerful and really really dug deep into what was happening and at the present. And I think that was them actually trying to make sense of what was happening around them. And I think that's how fiction and poetry can probably help, making sense of the dark that's happening around us. But you're right, there really is a massive effort, especially by authorities, to kind of downplay or to kind of give you misinformation about. Like I remember, for example, when Duterte said there are no books about martial law, I was so shocked because what about Killing Time in a Warm Place by Butch Dalisay? Like, so I actually compiled a long list of like poetry books, novels, essays, a long list of books about the martial law, and it got shared a lot by people just to counteract that misinformation that no books were written about the martial law.
Wait. Can
So
can go ahead.
I respectfully disagree that when you talk about the past, especially the dark parts of it, you have to be all somber and solemn because comedy is a very very strong means of fighting back. You remember that movie Life is Beautiful, set in a concentration camp. Uh, humor is demanded of our imagination to counter that darkness. Uh, even in my novel, Killing Time in the One Place, I recall a comic incident that actually happened. It's probably worth telling. I was imprisoned, but this movie, Mario Puzo, no? Godfather. I was underground. I was reading The Godfather. My political officers saw me reading the novel and said, "You shouldn't read that capitalist trash." But I thought, but this is a great novel. I want to read this. So I finished it anyway. And then I was imprisoned. And in prison, the Godfather comes to town. And I said, how the hell am I going to watch this movie? And so the prison commandant was sort of my friend. And he said, you know, draw me some sketches or do me a favor, and I will let you go and see the movie. And so when the movie comes, my mother picks me up, and then we have a soldier accompanying us
An escort,
to the
yeah.
movie house. So we go to the movie house, and it's packed full of people. It's standing room only. But everybody sees me arrive with a soldier with an M16. And suddenly 3 seats open. And there and then I appreciate the power of martial law. Because I can get a seat and watch The Godfather. Of course, at the end of the day, I'm back in prison. But I thought, you know, this is the funniest thing that ever happened to me under martial law. Now, of course, 99% of martial law was not like that. And I write about that too. But it is possible, it is part of our mission as writers to find these moments of humanity in the midst of inhumanity. Because then we remember what we are fighting to stay alive and free for.
Ian wants to. Yeah.
As just a rejoinder to Sir Butch, he mentioned movies, and I think that's where we actually fail as a literary culture. We have so many great novels about the martial law and other atrocity, whatever happened in the Philippines, but I actually compile a list of like Philippine literature being adapted to movies. Oh my God, not a lot. I think for the longest time, it was only Dekada 70 by Luwalhati Bautista that was translated to movies. And that's what the young people are actually consuming in culture, movies, comic books. But a lot of our books are not being translated, adapted into movies. I don't really know why. Killing Time in a Warm Place would make a great movie. How come no producer, Tanya, where are you? How come no producer has ever thought about making movies out of our stories? We need these adaptations actually, if you want to kind of bridge, the generations.
Okay, we have a question at the back. Microphone at the back row, please.
I'm referring to the talk of Mr. Dalisay. You mentioned a very important turning point in Philippine history, August 1983, with the assassination of Mr. Aquino. And you said you were thinking how to fictionalize it. Would you agree that the Philippines is undergoing a very turbulent political time? Comparing to Aquino, if you take the assassination, it was more or less the very start of the end of the Marcos era, because 3 more years were needed that finally Marcos was ousted. And given the current situation, I'm asking myself, have you any concrete plans to fictionalize the current time? Probably Voyager 2 or whatever? A last point is, what I find very intriguing and very important is, it was mentioned that the element of humor and metaphors are very powerful tools of resistance, especially when people are capable to really understand, beside the overall big texts, the contexts, the subtexts. And of course, you all know, I personally had the privilege and honor to be part of the first Quarter Storm, and sitting in Project 6 when the Diliman Commune in early 1971 started. Probably we have met then there, sitting on different chairs, but those were very important times. And I never forget, despite all the dire straits and the very difficult situation, there is one point that really is outstanding for you Filipinos. You never lost the sense of humor. That is good. And you always had very good metaphors. So I'm awaiting your novel Voyager #2. Thank you.
Oh, if there's another question, so is there a response or? Oh, let's gather. Okay, maybe we should just gather as many questions. No, and that's why yes, please ask questions.
I know it's fiction. This is addressed to everyone. I know it's fiction, but have you ever been taken to task for taking a certain bias or being revisionist or, emphasizing
Nationalist.
nationalist or emphasizing something? Ano, does somebody run into you and, I know this is fiction, but this shouldn't be the emphasis. Well, related to that, Tigulang, you wrote something about his love life. Did somebody tell
Oh.
you?
That's the descendants. Oh, well, when I was writing that particular story, I actually obeyed what Robin was saying. I have to be truthful. Oh, the research I did to really get into his life, even his private life, I dug deep into his relationship with this particular woman called Anna Kalug, things like that. So I could not, I found myself, because that was the first time somebody was fictionalizing this great man's life, I found it necessary to, as much as possible, stick close to the facts. And the facts were fascinating by themselves. So I didn't really need to embellish it much to kind of make it entertaining as a story.
Robin, you like 16th and 17th century as a period, and that's a period that has information, but not a lot, or there's room to do a lot of fiction. How do you navigate the amount of information you have in the 16th, 17th century?
Um, so it's centuries away from where I am. So definitely that's kind of hard. I'm a 21st century human. Those are very far. So at best, I can really just imagine what it is. I mean, thankfully, I can read Spanish, a bit of that, so I can at least get the vibe of how people were behaving then. And what really surprises me is that there are so many similarities. Of course, there are many differences, but at least the general vibe, these people are still people, in the same way that Filipinos are still people and Germans are still people. Although we have a very different culture, there are many similarities as well. So yeah, I suppose I'm just using really my being human, interacting with a fellow human through their letters and documents that they left us. So that's how I do it.
If you're looking at hope and happiness, why do you go to the past? Do you also go to the future?
For now, I go to the past. I don't have all the time in the world. So I'm just sticking with what intrigues me the most. Because one of our national artists, Nick Joaquin, thinks that those were the most crucial centuries of the Philippines, the 16th and the 17th. So when he said that, I started investigating, reading documents, and all that stuff. And yeah, I thought maybe there is something here. How ideas started to change for better or for worse. I mean, I think that's the case with every milieu. There are good things and bad things. And that's what I wanted to explore. And I was focusing on the good things, without, of course, ignoring that there were serious abuses and problems that also arose during those centuries. So by happy stories, I don't mean those superficial sitcoms. I don't mean that. In fact, I like humor. So the gentleman over here said something about the importance of humor as a resistance. And just to add to that, humor is such a very powerful thing because it doesn't only protest against people. Humor can protest against the very reason itself. If you think of any joke, you can't find a single reasonable joke. All jokes are absurd, even dad jokes, you will see. And that's why they're so powerful and so sensitive. That you don't only protest against a specific person that you joke about or a policy. You protest against the very essence of reason itself. That's why it's such a beautiful thing. It's intuitive. Nobody can really explain it. It's either you laugh or you miss it. You can't explain a joke. So yeah, thank you for talking about that. But yeah, I hope I'm not deviating too much. That's it.
Are there more questions? No. You know, there's this project in Ateneo Sandbox, a playful project. The title is Tandang Tanda. And it is a project where the Manila Observatory, which is the first observatory for scientific observation, has a lot of roosters. So they're studying time in a cultural infrastructure because the roosters signal sunrise. And then they started measuring, do they do their sounds in a way that matches the international time, whatever you call it. And it also reminds me of how Indonesian wayang kulit maestros, while they're performing, they know it's 4 a.m. if they're performing overnight without looking at their watch, just by knowing how cold the wind is on their necks. I think that the Southeast Asian environment provides us with our sense of time, which is somewhat matched but not quite by our own watches. So when you mentioned Filipino time, I'm wondering, is your concept of time just the period? Or do you also play around with the concept of time in terms of how we live with time as Filipinos? You know, I know that there's a metaphor for some African communities where time is in front of you. So the past is in front of you because you see it, you know it, and the future is behind you, which is totally different from our thinking of how the past is behind us and the future is ahead of us. It's the complete opposite. So I'd like to ask you, what's your concept of time? Is there a Filipino sense of it in the way you write, and what is that like?
Well, what comes to my mind is that our clocks are in our stomachs. Oras ng kumain. You know, in terms of, you know, we Filipinos don't just eat 3 times a day. Okay, we have breakfast, and then there's the mid-morning snack, the merienda, and then lunch, and then another snack in the mid-afternoon, and then dinner, and then maybe after that, yet another snack. So these are the ways we calibrate the day, and I think we do observe these wherever we are, even here, and these are the guideposts by which our days are defined.
In my own fiction, I guess kind of captured Filipino time in terms of the especially when I describe my hometown, you know, the countryside and everything, the languor. Because really, what's time in the Philippines? There's just, in terms of day, there's day and night.
And they say there's
Yeah.
island time
And-
that's different from Manila time.
Yeah, actually. If you think
The
about
way
it.
time
And then in
passes.
terms of, we don't really have seasons either. So there's no winter, no spring, no summer, no fall. It's just rainy and sunny. So I really feel that, especially for Europeans, you really have marked demarcations of time. This is that. And in the Philippines, no. So we just kind of, I guess, capture it in terms of the slowness of everything.
And if you ask someone, what time is he coming? The people will say, maya-maya lang.
Yeah.
They will come in
It's
a
not
little,
definite.
yeah,
So forgive us for our Filipino time. It's just how we live,
how we structure.
how we structure it.
Yes, Robin.
In my case, I'm not really thinking as a Filipino, just an ordinary human. When I think of time, I think about what I should already have or what I should have already achieved given my age. Like I'm 38 now, so how many books should I have written already? How many children should I have had? How many places should I have visited? It's more of a question like that, and also this far question: until when am I gonna be here? And when are things gonna when are new things gonna come? When are they gonna end? That's how I mainly think of it, really.
One last question because we're about to wrap up. Who wants to take this last question? Yes. Nope. Then I will share. I have a student, and I'm in an interdisciplinary studies, and students have to combine 2 things. One is computer science and history. And the student said, I want to create 3D speculative art of massacre sites because the photos for them do not exist. And so he creates from the world building perspective because they play a lot of games. He creates how the coastline may have looked near the Manili massacre because there was a preponderance of power. Martial law was really military military World War II aircraft carriers that were tugged there. They weren't moving, but they were floating military boats. 10 of them with helicopters and arms, so huge. And when I looked at the output, I said, why does this look so beautiful? It seems like an advertisement in pride of the power of the Philippine military. It was because the time that happened, according to accounts, was dawn. And because he was faithful to how beautiful dawn looks like in that part of the world, it looks so hopeful. And I said, what's your agenda? What is your advocacy? If it is to highlight martial law, a beautiful sunrise that is truthful to the beauty of the islands is not going to drive home that point. And so he changed it to the black and white of World War II reportage so he could play around with the truth of the beauty of the area. So that the time could be played around with, because dawn is a metaphor for hope. And if you don't play around with your colors, you may send the opposite message and glorify that which you want to remind people really happened. I don't know why I shared that, but yeah. But I think that with that we could say that this panel on fictionalizing time looked at not just Filipino time and how we live it, but also the periodization of time through the great periods of events in our history, but also milestones, personal or otherwise. And it is one way by which authors who are aware of it and use it are able to express our way of being Filipino. So thank you very much.